Hello from Northwest Arkansas. My name is Kimberly Carey, and I am the owner of So Sassy Stitcher. I am working on a new block of the month. This is one that I got from the Stitch and Snip in Garden Valley, Idaho, and it is a couple of years old, but I am going to go ahead and do it as my own block of the month. So maybe you have this in your stash and you picked it up at some point and you just haven't gotten around to it. So hopefully this will motivate you to finish that project and work alongside me with this. And if you need a little extra guidance or help, maybe this will help you. I hope so. So this is Mountain Meadow. It is very muted purples and creams and blues, and there are 25 fabrics in this. So the first thing that I did was when I got my kit out, I went through trying to make sure that I had all of my fabrics correct and labeled so that I didn't mix them up, because some of these it's a little hard to tell which one is which. These two are very close in color. There are some of these very light colored ones that I hope I got the right one. Good news is, like, these are very, very similar. They're a half yard each. So if I didn't get them quite correct, if I mixed them up, it's probably not going to be the end of the world. Okay, so 25 fabrics. It's a lot to work with. So for this one, it's broken up into 9 months. I may do it into 10. We'll see how it goes, but I worked on month 1 first. So the first thing that I did was I looked and found which fabrics I was going to be using for this month. There are 14 of the 25 fabrics that we are using in this month alone. Kind of a lot. So I ironed all of my fabrics. Here's the thing, I don't generally pre-shrink my fabrics. When I have done block of the months and things like that, you go to class, you don't have an opportunity to pre-shrink your fabrics. So I've stopped doing that for most of my fabrics, okay? And there are times where, especially if you only have a limited bit of fabric and you shrink it and it shrinks a whole lot, you might not have enough fabric, right? Or if it unravels a lot in the wash or anything like that, you could potentially be losing that fabric and then end up not having enough fabric. So I don't pre-shrink my fabric. I've never really had problems afterwards. I don't wash my quilts a whole lot. I am not one that washes my quilt as soon as it's bound to be able to, have that look. I like them the fresh look. I wash them when needed, but I don't wash them other than that. So the pre-shrinking thing, I'm not too worried about for most things. If I'm gonna have like a red and white quilt, I probably will pre-shrink my reds at least, and put some color catcher in there and trying to bleed that fabric out as much as possible before I put it with that white so that I don't get that bleeding happening. But for this one, I did not bother to pre-shrink my fabrics. I just pulled them out and I ironed them. Now, this one is a little bit different. When you do a block of the month in the quilt shop, they're generally going to have pre-cut some of this for you, at least into smaller chunks than a half a yard. So like for fabric 1, it wants a 3x3 square. Well, they're probably going to do a lot of these kits and just cut 3.5-inch squares for everybody, and you cut it down to your 3-inch square. For me, I just did a little bit. So like on this fabric 1 where I had a 3-inch square, I cut out just a 3-inch square. I didn't even cut a strip off because I don't know what else I'm going to need for the next month. If you want to make sure that you have enough, then you could go through all the different months, mark down exactly what you need for each of the fabrics so that you can play that out. I'm going to cross my fingers and hope for the best. I didn't want to take the time to do that. So I am just kind of going along and hoping for the best. If I need to piece a little bit later to get what I need, I can, or if I need to scrounge and find, some more of those pieces then I can. Stitch and snip is really pretty good about making sure that you have enough fabric as long as you cut correctly. So I don't think it'll be too big of an issue. You'll also see that I have notes on my instructions. So I have learned over the years that, especially working with triangles and squares and all of those things, they always get a little bit wonky. You're working on the bias, things stretch a little bit. For most quilters, it's gonna be a little bit wonky. So what I did was, on anything that was a triangle, I increased the size of the cut just a little bit. There's a lot of eighths in that they want you to cut in this. I really don't like to cut eighths. It's more time consuming, and that little bit doesn't really matter. So I popped everything up that was a triangle to the next increment. So if it was 3 3/8, I did 3 1/2. If it was 4 7/8, I did 5. So you can see that on here. On this fabric 3, instead of the 5 1/4, I cut 5 1/2 inch square. Instead of 3 3/4, I went ahead and did a 4-inch. The fabric 6, I did 9-inch instead of 8 3/4. I did 4-inch instead of 3 3/4. This one I did 3 1/2 instead of 3 3/8. Fabric 9, I did 5 inches instead of 4 7/8. Fabric 11, I have 5 1/2 instead of 5 1/4, and then I did a 4 instead of a 3 3/4. Fabric 13, I did a 5 1/2 inch square instead of the 5 1/4. Fabric 17, I went ahead and did that 9-inch square again, and a 3 1/2 inch square with those cuts. Fabric 19, I did 5-inch instead of 4 7/8. So those are the changes that I made on this one. Because what that's going to allow me to do is, when I put these blocks together and I get my square, I'm going to then square it up and cut it down to the size that it needs to be. It just gives me a little bit of wiggle room. Is it a little bit more work? Yes, but I would rather take the time to do that and have a nice square than have a wonky square that I'm trying to then fit with square pieces and then have that whole strip be wonky and be frustrated with it. So this is a really easy way, by just adjusting these a hair, to be able to make these blocks go together nicer and then have your whole block go together nicer. So if you are working ahead and you're looking at this, any of your months, that's what I'm going to do, is I'm just going to go through and I'm going to make sure that I'm popping these up just a touch. And it's generally not enough that you're going to run out of fabric. There's small enough amounts that you shouldn't run out of fabric by increasing that amount. So then I'm just looking at, what else I have to make sure that I'm got everything that I need. So I went ahead and I ironed everything, and then I cut all of these things out. I used labels to be able to label all of my pieces, what fabric they are, and then what block that they go with. We're making really 3 blocks today, and we're making block 1A, 1B, and then we've got a spacer block that we're making. And so there's a big block, a small block, and then there's just kind of that spacer in between. The block is essentially the same block. It's just different sizes with the different colors of fabric. So what I did was cut everything. I just put it in a pile as I cut it, okay? Then I separated everything out. I again marked my fabric with the fabric number and what block it goes to. So then I just separated out my fabrics. I have my 1B, I have my 1A, and I have my spacer piles, okay? Then what I did was I looked at what I was gonna need to make the first part of the block. So I'm working on the half square triangle blocks and the quarter square triangle blocks. And so I, not only for 1A and 1B, but also I looked ahead to my spacer. So what I'm gonna do, what I did was I pulled out all of those triangles, made sure that I had everything that it was supposed to be, and I actually found a couple of the squares that I had not cut diagonally like I was supposed to, found those, got those cut. So now I have everything set. So I can just sit and sew these blocks up. So these are what I'm doing for my spacer. Okay, so I'm gonna do both of these and then I'm gonna put those together to make one of those. Is that right? No, two of those. I'm gonna have two of those. Okay, because there's four of these and there will be 4 in a block. So that'll be two of those. And then I am going to have in my 1B block, I have my 3s, and then I have both 11 and 6 in my triangles that are going to go together, making sure, and I like to put them out like this so I know which sides are supposed to go with which, because even having it flipped over is going to make a difference in your block. So you want to make sure, I like to make sure that I have everything laid out the way that it needs to go together in the direction that it goes. You can do that however it works for you. This is what works for me to make sure that I'm sewing the correct sides together. Okay, and then I also have my fabric 17 and my fabric 8 that are going to go in a block just like this. And again, these are slightly oversized. They're not hugely oversized. They're minimally oversized so that when I sew that together, I can trim it up. I'm going to have just a few threads that I'm trimming up. It's not going to be much that I'm trimming off of these. Okay, so I have those set like that. For my 1A, again, this is my quarter square triangle block. So I have my fabric 13 that's going to go with 11 and with my 3. And again, I have them set like this so that they go, the correct sides go together in the correct way, because it is going to make a difference in that block. And then the last thing that I have is my fabric 9 and my fabric 19 that I am going to put together. So this is as far as I have gotten on this one so far. I am going to work on sewing these blocks together, checking the ironing directions and all of that. And then I will post another video with that information for you. I hope this helps you get started on Mountain Meadow. And it's a beautiful quilt, and I am looking forward to having this one done and working along with you to get this project completed for you. Have a great day.